You may have heard of the Gates Foundation, but I bet you have no idea what the foundation has done to the society and the
So
world.
for this device, you can put it on the camera, or you can...
This time we came to the Gates Foundation China office and interviewed its head, Li Yinuo, who showed us around the office, and we talk a lot about philanthropy. Li Yinuo has got many labels: a former McKinsey partner, head of the Gates Foundation in China, a blogger with 800,000 followers, founder of an innovative education group in Beijing and Silicon Valley, and a mother of 3 children. How do you manage to get all these done? I can't imagine this.
Well, first of all, some of them are sequential, so you don't do all of them at the same time. Okay. Also, on surface, it's quite separate, different type of things I'm doing. But actually, in a way, when I think about it, it's also quite integrated. I think when we kind of approach life, there are things we do at different levels. I call it on surface are the things you do on sort of the how-to level, right? So this is how you learn to operate in a professional environment, how do you learn to, the basic skills of being a mom and all that. So, I guess we all kind of operate on that level. So if I look at my McKinsey career, it was really, I'm really grateful because I think that's where I learned a lot around the how-to, right? So how do you be effective in a professional setting? How do you set strategy? How do you define problems and all that? So that's at that level. And then I think, deeper down is probably the level is really around kind of mindset and how do you approach things. I think it's probably reflection at that level that led me to the foundation work. What are some of the choices I can make with my time? So in my view, that's why kind of my life experience is actually kind of integration. It just manifests in different ways. I'm a pretty normal person as anybody else. I probably have chosen to surface many of the reflections I've had.
You imagine about, you reflect on yourself. Who are you? I'm going to ask you again. Who are you? How do you define yourself with all these roles, in life and in work?
Yeah, well, that's the ultimate philosophical pursuit. Yeah. So I think I can, that's why, again, it depends on at what level you ask those questions, right? So on the surface, you have a lot of labels. What do you do for your job? What degrees do you have? What kind of, universities you graduate from? I think that's the type of surface. But I think deep down, in the foundation, I guess, when Bill and Melinda talk about themselves, they call themselves impatient optimists, right? So I think that's one label. For me, too, I think I call myself probably a realistic dreamer. Yeah, so I guess in a way, many of things I've started doing because those are things that I can't stop myself from pursuing. So I guess that's the dreamer part. But of course, many of the things you want to do, you have to figure out how to really get it done. So there's the realistic part. I think that's probably who I am. So then, there are probably different, you will show up in different capacity or labels, but I guess in essence, that's what it is.
You also mentioned about choices, and you left McKinsey 4 years ago and came back to China to do the Gates Foundation. I think it's a really big decision, right? You have to come back with your family and bring your children here. What made you do the decision?
Yeah, I think it's also probably asking that question, right? So what do I really want? Do I try to fit in or live up to a certain expectation of what this role would be? Because the typical path as a McKinsey partner when you leave the firm is that you either join a big client as a senior management or you do some type of startup. But when this opportunity came up, despite everything else, if I, in essence, look at the mission, the vision of the organization, I think really very much aligned with what I wanted to do. It's more a opportunity for me rather than a cost, right? So this is, suddenly there's a new gateway that opened, which is a path you probably didn't have a chance to pursue before.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invests in ideas that could change the lives of millions of the world's poorest people. The Gates Foundation China office is committed to supporting development within China in areas including poverty alleviation, nutrition, and philanthropic development. The foundation also supports China as a development partner for the rest of the world. Bill and Melinda Gates just released their 2019 annual letter, on which they mentioned about 9 surprises, which they either concerned or inspired by these surprises. So which surprises do you resonate the most?
Yeah, I think the one that struck me the most is definitely this whole comment around Africa demography. It really came as a surprise because when you're in China, you oftentimes think about Africa as this remote continent, right? So only in political news you talk about it. There are two facts. One is that this is a continent that's going to more than double its population by 2050. So it's now around over 1 billion people, similar to the population of China. But by 2050, it will reach about 2.5 billion, right? So think about it, if you put in our own shoes, it's hard to imagine the China population by 2050 becoming 2.5 billion, right? But that's really what's happening by the current projection of the continent.
Yeah, then what do you do exactly? Many people heard about the Gates Foundation, but I bet not many people know what you actually do. So what do you actually do?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'll put it in very simple words. And in very simple, the very basic things what we do is we give out money, right? We give out money in form of grants. It's not as simple as that. It's really with the money we actually develop with our grantee what the strategy would be and then what are you going to use the money for and what's the goal. So that's in essence, the operations of what we do. And in terms of China, Africa, what we do are really a few areas. One area is on health, as example, is one area we're trying to work with China is on malaria control. So malaria is this disease that's transmitted by mosquitoes. China used to suffer greatly from it. I think in 1950s, China has about 30 million cases a year, so which is a huge number. Yeah, by 2017, China has made remarkable progress that by 2017, China has 0 cases, basically down to 0. So if we, I think 2018, there's another 0. If by this year we're 0 again, then we could just announce we have eliminated malaria domestically, which is a huge achievement, right, for a country that's populous and then with a disease that's prevalent. But basically, we're trying to say, can we get some of that experience to Africa? Because today in the world, every year there are still hundreds of millions of people that suffer from malaria. Close to a million people will die, and 80% of the case burden are actually in Africa. So what we're doing is, to be very concrete, we're actually giving a grant to the China National Health Commission, basically to support them to work with Tanzania, for example. That's one of the strategy areas we have to see if we can have a pilot program in Tanzania where we can use the China experience in malaria control in there. So that's like one example, like how concretely we're spending our money in doing this. Yeah.
So what do you think your career in philanthropy has changed you or influenced you all these years?
In essence, it gave me a different viewpoint of looking at the world and looking at the society. I think in a way, there's a saying which really clarified a lot of things for me, saying if you look at the human society, there are in essence only 3 sectors. There's the public sector, which is government and related institutions. There's private sector, which is basically companies, enterprises. And then everything else is social sector, right? So if by narrow definition, then philanthropy is in the social sector, which is a sector I never engaged in before. But broadly, if you look at all the big social problems we're facing, right? If you be it education, be it environment, be it poverty reduction, be it, gender equality, all those issues, if you think about it, none of them can be solved without working across the 3 sectors, right? So I think when it gets to social sector or get to philanthropy, they really view themselves by nature a actor in connecting the 3 sectors. So I think that's really a different viewpoint I didn't have before. But because before you were thinking, okay, this is philanthropy is something you do after you get rich or when you retire, right? And second, viewpoint that has really, enlightened me is this whole global mindset and global view. When you get to philanthropy, you actually see this is probably one area where there's the least barrier in engaging on global issues, right? Because government definitely has its own mechanisms. Companies, of course, mostly are businesses operating. But if you look at trying to address some of the two of our biggest divisions are called global health and global development, and most of the issues you require a new type of thinking, a new type of mechanisms that can work with various partners and entities across the globe. I think the third kind of change it has made on me is really viewing the world in the much wider or much wider horizon. Because when I was in McKinsey, despite the fact that we served clients in many industries, in different continents, we travel a lot and see many different companies. First of all, it's a private sector issue. And second, for this company who can afford hiring McKinsey are actually big companies, right? So you're really addressing some of the, I would say, probably typical middle class problems. When you get to philanthropy, you will see, because the nature of the problem you're addressing is much broader, oftentimes much more complex. For example, in China, we work with poverty reduction. We actually have worked with some of the diseases that only affect the poor. So you really actually get to see the world that I just didn't get to see much before. I guess element of reality and reality into life, and then always try to tell yourself, actually, everybody's life is just as common as mine. So then you'll try to get to the inspiration out of it, but don't make it a factor to make yourself feel down or feel less qualified. I think that's probably the most important trick.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. Thank you for all the answers. It's a very pleasant conversation. Thank you. And
thank
also
you
your introduction of the Gates Foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. 好吧，那我们去做那些乱七八糟的。好，这是你老板。